You can use neuropharmaceuticals to give yourself an entire new personality. You can use hormones and surgeries to give yourself, or at least try to approximate, a new biological sex and a new body. You'll be able to customize your genome someday. You can escape into virtual reality and kind of customize your avatar however you want and move through the world. One of the things I focus on, one of the applications of AI that I focus on the most in the book, is this rise of kind of AI companions or boyfriends or girlfriends. The difference in what Satan was offering was, no, you can become like gods without a relationship with God. And that's what transhumanism promises us.
Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. And I just want to give a special shout out again to all the young guys that have been joining us with Claymore. Guys, let's be real. The world's coming at you fast, from the constant scroll of social media to the hookup culture on dating apps. It's easy to get pulled into the version of manhood. That's not ourselves. We're feeling this, huh? You guys are reaching out and say, hey, we're looking for something more. We're trying to get our feet on the ground. And just when all that happens, we've got all the AI coming at you, all the talk about transhumanism, and you just feel like you're getting blown around by the spirits of the age. To talk about that, I have Grayson Quay with me today. He wrote a book, Transhumanism, The Transhumanist Temptation, How Technology and Ideology Are Reshaping Humanity, and how to resist. We're going to talk to him about why we should resist anyways, or just let this happen to us. Let me give you just a little background on Grayson. He's a former editor at The Week and The Daily Caller. His writing has appeared in National Review, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazelle, Newsweek, The American Conservative, The Spectator World, and other outlets. Grayson earned his MA from Georgetown University in 2019. Grayson, good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you wrote an interesting book, and, there's a lot of questions today. The people that we're speaking to are just trying to ground themselves and trying to ground their kids and their grandkids. So this goes across the spectrum, Grayson. And just when we're starting to get our story down, AI comes in. Everybody's been talking about the transhumanism, of course. We throw God out. Forget about God, the church, and the Bible. We're going to live forever now. We're going to have this thing figured out. So how did you get interested in this topic?
Yeah, it sort of came about indirectly. I've been a freelance writer since 2016. I've been writing for a lot of different outlets. And I never really developed a clear beat, sort of like one topic that I just write about all the time. I always had this diverse range of interests.
Okay.
So I was really always interested in biotech issues, abortion, IVF, surrogacy, things like that. I was always really interested in kind of emerging virtual technologies and what that said about our status as incarnate beings. I got really interested in the discussion politically around post-liberalism that was led by Patrick Deneen and Gladden Papin and some thinkers like that, largely in within the Catholic Church. And then
unpack that for our young guys coming in without getting too granular. What is post-liberalism? I mean, just give them a little taste what you mean by that.
Yeah, post-liberalism is kind of a view of politics. It's articulated most clearly in Why Liberalism Failed by Patrick Deneen, but it's basically this idea that liberalism, the kind of dominant ideology of the modern world that kind of starts in 17th century Europe and is kind of underlying most modern Western political regimes today, has sort of reached an endpoint and kind of burned itself out by focusing exclusively on kind of this idea of the autonomous individual and maximizing that individual's freedom and that individual's rights. We've lost the sense of the common good.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. It's really this, freedom, right? Freedom is the number one thing, but it doesn't really say freedom for, and this is going to tie in, I think, to our conversation. This is why I asked you.
Yeah,
because really it's easy to have freedom, right? I mean, we all want freedom to do whatever we want, but at the end of the day, Grayson, and I think this will tie in, right? We all stand before that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we have to decide, which way we're going to go. Do we do good in the world? And what does good even mean? Do we create, bring evil into the world? And what does that mean? Because if we're all free, brother, there's going to be some that are going to grab the power, and their freedom, might be freedom for tyranny and overuse. So we get that, but now we've got AI and the transhumanism
Yeah.
coming in, and they're kind of on the same vein of that. We can be free. We can be free to be anybody we want.
Well, the question of what freedom is and what it's for is really key to this discussion of transhumanism, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, just to give an example, the Declaration of Independence famously says the pursuit of happiness is one of man's inalienable rights. The question is, what does happiness mean? Does it mean whatever you want it to mean? That's what most modern people see it as. They see it as saying that the state or society as a whole needs to be neutral as to competing conceptions of the good life. The state and society as a whole don't get to say what human flourishing looks like. Getting married, having children, trying to raise them to be virtuous people, versus, you know, living in a six-person polycule or sitting on your couch and ordering DoorDash and watching porn all day. These are just choices people make, and they are all to be treated as equally valid from the standpoint of public policy. That's really where kind of this modern, really degraded definition of the pursuit of happiness gets us. But, I think when they say that, what they mean is eudaimonia, like the Aristotelian idea of happiness, which is human flourishing, the kind of flourishing that's proper to humans, as the kind of beings that they are. And that's something we can know through reason. St. Thomas Aquinas talks about this. Natural law is the reason's participation in the eternal law, which is, then confirmed and built upon by revelation. But we can know a lot through reason about the existence of God, about our duties to one another, about the nature of virtue. Um, and we can figure that out through reason because we're humans, because we're rational animals, and because we're a certain type of being. We can use reason to figure out what the excellence proper to us is as the kind of being that we are.
Yeah,
And to me,
and
that's the freedom we're aiming at, right? It's the freedom of an acorn to fulfill its nature and become and flourish and become an oak tree, right? Today, we want to say that, if you're an acorn, you can become an oak tree or you can become a blueberry bush.
and this is this speaks directly. You just unpacked a beautiful way to do that, and guys are going to have to. The good thing about technology is we can go back though and listen to this again. But the guys that are joining us with Claymore again, this is picking up the sword, Grayson, and this is fighting, as John Paul would say, on the battlefield of the heart. Huh? What is authentic love? What is freedom for? Huh? Or lust and selfishness? But at the end of the day, you said something very, very good, and I don't want our young audience to lose that. The reason they're looking for something more is because we have reason. We have the natural love. It's built into our hearts, and they know that this being blown around by the spirit of the age they're seeking something more. They don't know exactly what it is, Grayson. They voted for Donald Trump just because he seems like he's got something solid. But transhumanists want to kind of take you back. AI can take you back. I mean, there's good things, right? So help us unpack some of that. We don't want to just dismiss any of this, right?
Yeah.
Is there some good? What is a transhumanist trying to get at? I can use AI once in a while to look things up, but I could see it can really disconnect you.
So I was just reading this great quote actually from John Paul II, where he was talking to young people, young men, I think, and saying like the restlessness in your heart that you feel as a young person, Christ is the answer to that. This kind of identity crisis you're undergoing as, an adolescent or as a young adult. The answer that you'll find, this desire for some kind of authenticity, ultimately you'll find fulfillment for that in Christ. And I think that's true. Transhumanism is kind of a way of offering you that authenticity in a way that is trying to be a substitute for what can only be found in God. So one of the thinkers I engage with in my book is Jean-Paul Sartre, who's kind of the father of existentialism, and his philosophy kind of boils down to this one line, which is that for humanity, existence precedes essence. So for him, humanity doesn't really have a nature. We are the products of kind of blind evolutionary forces that just happen to produce us as we are and sort of condemn us to having the freedom to decide what we're going to be. There is no God, there is no natural law, there is no. We can't derive any duties or any oughts from the kind of creatures that we are. So for him, it becomes this awful burden of deciding what a good person is, deciding what a person or a human is at all. And once you have that idea, you have kind of transhumanism in a nutshell, where the human ceases to have any meaning except the being that defines itself, which is circular. Now you're just waiting for technology to come along and give you more and more and more options for, defining yourself and defining what life is going to mean to you and what kind of creature you're going to be. And it really serves, I talk about this in the book, to intensify that identity crisis and intensify that search for authenticity, because there are so many options now available to you that were not before. You can use neuropharmaceuticals to give yourself an entire new personality. You can use hormones and surgeries to give yourself, or at least try to approximate, a new biological sex and a new body. You'll be able to customize your genome someday. You can escape into virtual reality and kind of customize your avatar however you want, and move through the world as that kind of discarnate being. So this brings me back to AI, which I think also contributes to this sense of restlessness and actually feeds upon it and offers kind of fake solutions for the problems that we encounter and the longings that we feel. One of the things I focus on, one of the applications of AI that I focus on the most in the book, is this rise of kind of AI companions or boyfriends or girlfriends, which, there's some people kind of in the tech sphere who will argue that, it's all just information processing, right? Like the human brain runs on carbon, AI runs on silicon chips, but really, you can't make a hard and fast division between human intelligence and machine intelligence. So who are we to say that, this construct that you've fallen in love with isn't real? But the problem is when you're using one of these things, you're being exploited. They're profiting off of you by offering you a partner, right? A fake partner who's always perfect, who always is attentive to you, who always texts you back right away, who always says the right thing, says the thing you want to hear. And it alienates us from each other, from, the world around us, from the families that we should be forming, and even from the sexual act, which is kind of the sort of most embodied thing that we do as humans. And that's taken away from us through these constructs that
Grayson, all through history, every time the steam engine came, and we always thought, man, let's just. I remember patents. They just said, let's just stop issuing patents to anybody because we've discovered everything, and and then the airplane comes, etc. We're always going out, and we're supposed to do this, right? Human beings are supposed to be using the things around us and discovering and create them. This transhumanism and AI, and John Paul II looking out, into the future, he was quite a prophet. He thought there'd be a time where some really dangerous we'd get to the point where we could use this technology in a very dangerous way. This seems to me to be something different. It's on another level, because what you're getting to and what you get into in the book, and the book is very good, by the way. I mean, it's really done well, so thank you for that. It really can take your mind and your body into a weird place, man, if you're not careful. Is this more dangerous? This transhumanist view of the world, coupled with AI, coupled with technology, because we always have this idea that we're supposed to be transcend, our basic human nature. So this is kind of a built in. So, the devil never uses if he never puts some truth into a lie, we just reject it. But
Yeah.
here
So
we feel like,
mhm.
yes, there's
Yeah, so
something more.
my original title for the book was The Serpent's Promise. I ended up going with the
Hmm.
title I chose because I wanted to have the word transhumanist in there. But, like you said, there's always kind of truth in the enemy's lies. And in this case, when he says to Adam and Eve, you will be as gods, um, that's not a lie necessarily. God's plan for them was, theosis, was to be glorified in this way, was to become partakers of the divine nature, as St. Peter puts it in one of his letters. The difference in what Satan was offering was, no, you can become like gods without a relationship with God, and that's what transhumanism promises us as well.
Yes, it
So I think
does.
that, yeah,
What a great point right here. And I just want everybody to absorb what Grayson just said. This is an old lie, right? You will not die, right? You will be like God, who will know good and evil, who could call good evil. In other words, I can call the real good evil and call the real evil good. You can decide that. This is an old lie, but man, if you don't have a core knowledge, a core a faith life rooted in Christ, man, you can get blown around.
you made a point earlier about kind of technological advancement. It's true that every technological advancement presents risks, right? Airplanes, you can go visit your family in Europe, but you can also drop bombs on people, right?
Yes,
Any technology can be used in this way, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, that kind of thing.
exactly.
But I think transhumanist technology is of a different sort. I think it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons in the sense that it's like boiling a frog. Like one day we'll just wake up and we won't be human anymore. Uh, And I don't want people to walk away from this book with the impression that I'm anti-technology. This is kind of the pushback I've gotten from transhumanists that I've tried to engage with, when I've talked to
There's
them
no
about this book,
surprise there, brother.
is they'll
No
say like, "Oh,
surprise
you're
there.
just a Luddite." If you'd lived back in caveman days, you'd have said, "No, don't sharpen sticks. We need to just keep throwing rocks."
Yes, yes, of course.
And I think that comes from, I think the reason that transhumanist types kind of leap to that conclusion is because they don't have any philosophical resources that they could use to draw a line in how technology was applied. Um, Specifically, I think you need an understanding of natural law in order to do that. You need to have some idea of what is human nature, what does human flourishing look like, what does a healthy human being look like, and how do we use technology to promote like basic human goods that flow from our nature, that flow from the kind of beings that we are. Um,
Isn't it interesting, Grayson? And don't lose your thought there because you're making important points here. But isn't it interesting that just when we need this philosophical background, right? In natural law, that we've taken it all out of the schools, and isn't it something?
yeah,
It's almost like a setup for what you're getting
I think
into.
you're right. Yeah. So one example would be something that I talk about in the book is artificial wombs. Um, it's a kind of a scary kind of sci-fi dystopian thing. There's actually a very valid application of this, which would be if a woman goes into labor early before her unborn child's reached the point of viability, or in a tragic case where a woman's life is in danger and early labor has to be induced even though the child isn't yet viable. The church doesn't consider that an abortion. Kind of people in the secular sphere will try to call it one, but in this case, you're really treating both mother and child as patients. There's just kind of no chance the child would survive, unfortunately. But if you had some kind of artificial womb, some kind of bag or gestational pod that could replicate the conditions of the womb that you could quickly transfer that child to, where it could develop until it reached the point of viability, you could avoid that tragedy. Both the mother and the child could live. There have actually been kind of abortion rights activists who've argued against artificial wombs because they're afraid that it would undermine the rationale for abortion, because now suddenly you can end your pregnancy if you no longer want to be, if you withdraw your consent to be gestating the baby, which is a strange way of thinking. But you would
Yes.
still have a baby. And they don't want that. It's that the point isn't to stop being pregnant. It is to avoid parenthood by killing the baby. And they don't want to admit that. But anyway, as I was saying, this is a good application of artificial wombs. But I'm terrified of this technology coming into existence because although I'm sure they would be used for good in some of those cases, the vast majority of their use would be for evil. You would see them emerge as just kind of a consumer technology that anyone could have access to. Um,
I could just see, just like in Brave New World, and I think wasn't it Huxley that had these babies lined up,
yeah.
like the surrogacy, and they're just lined up being produced, and
Yeah, he was
you see
incredibly prescient. It's really
yeah,
interesting, actually. This is kind of a a side note, but Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World. His brother Julian Huxley coined the term transhumanism. In
yes,
about 20 years later.
yes, yes,
Yeah, so it's kind of a family affair, and I believe their father, or maybe their uncle, was one of the early followers of Darwin, and famously had a debate against an Anglican bishop over evolution, in which he kind of laid the groundwork for this evolutionary view of the world that undermines the idea of human nature and leads to the eugenics movement that Julian Huxley played a leading role in, and that ultimately creates this impression that humanity now has the scientific and technological knowledge to take control of human evolution and decide where it goes in the future, which is
yeah.
sort of the central idea of transhumanism.
When you listen to some of these people talk, and who's that young guy? I always forget his name, from the World Economic Forum under Schwab, Klaus Schwab,
Yeah.
Yuri or
Yeah.
Harari.
Yeah,
Is it
Harari. Yeah, Yuval Noah
Harari?
Harari. Yeah.
And when he speaks about transhumanism and how we're not going to need people anymore, there's something that in your heart, something's really wrong with the way he looks at the world. And God bless us if we all end up like that, with that worldview, looking at one another. I look at you. I look at the people around me like that. Man, that's a world that has become really dehumanized. Huh?
Yeah, well,
It's
this is really
inhumane.
what one of the things that frightens me about AI is I think you already have so many people who feel superfluous in the world, um, who feel as though they don't have a purpose. They say, "Well, I can't get married, I can't have a family. Um, there's nothing in my life that's pushing me to pursue meaning in any way that I can find compelling." A lot of the outlets that are offered to me are kind of demonized by the broader kind of mainstream culture, which I think is fueling a lot of the deaths of despair that you see. I don't have meaningful work. My work is just clicky clacky on a laptop all day, and then I go home and order DoorDash and watch Netflix and smoke weed until I pass out. Um, and of course, those people are falling into despair. And I think that if, predictions about AI replacing white collar workers turn out to be accurate, and also as AI starts to replace people within human interactions as well, you know, the roles previously filled by friends and confidants and mentors and romantic partners, I think that people are going to start feeling more and more superfluous and are going to fall deeper and deeper into despair.
We are built for relationships, and I think this is the core of any philosophical and theological kind of discussion. Is you have to step back. What one of the things I think we can help young people with, and I'll throw this in your court, is to say, a body and a soul. And if you take out this idea that we're a body and a soul meant for eternal life, then you're just looking. The default position is looking at a 6-foot hole in front of you, with a whitewashed tomb, chisel poised, ready to put Jack's name on it. Sin and death is just a reality. And so I think when these young people, Grayson, that are coming into and sharing this apostlate with us, what it is, it's a one-on-one type of a discipleship, and then we're building a community out from there. This is what they're tapping into: relationships, right? Relationships. I'm looking for something more. And now you start to talk to other people. I'm talking to you, and we start to discuss these things. And I find regardless sometimes of the discussion itself, we're talking about transhumanists, and we should, but we're doing it with another person, and then we see the other person, and we come into a relationship with that person. We go, yes, yes, this is touching my heart. So this is, we can't get away from this. I think, again, stepping back and saying, you talked about reason. Reason's always seeking the truth, huh? I'm seeking what is the truth of things. So where are we going to go with this transhumanist thing? That the reality is, for the Bill Gates of the world and some of the tech moguls, they're trying to live forever. Grayson, I mean, where's this going to end? You know, are they going to find their utopia?
Yeah, there is this kind of movement. Brian Johnson's a really prominent figure in this weird kind of biohacker guy who already sort of looks like an android. He's already, I mean, you can kind of see it just in his face and his body, like that he's becoming less human in a way. Um, but yeah, this desire to live forever really is, pretty transparently this Luciferian impulse, this desire for immortality, this desire to kind of achieve a deification or a theosis apart from God. I try to, in the book, I try to look at, well, what would the worst case scenario be? And I think, well, there's a chance, and, I'm probably hoping for this, if I'm honest, that there's enough backlash to this stuff that we're able to kind of reassert an understanding of natural law that can control how we use these technologies, or that these technologies precipitate some kind of backlash, or, even kind of regression that spares us from the worst of it. But I also try to ask myself, like, what if it succeeds? What if the world around us really does become these genetically modified supermen who are immortal, who are 100 times more intelligent than the rest of us because they've melded their brains with AI in some way and upgraded their cognitive capacity, who have the ability to uh, who have a total freedom of form, have this ability to kind of upload and download their consciousness into and out of virtual worlds, and then back down into their own body, or a robotic shell, or a vat-grown body of some kind that they choose to inhabit for a time. You have a world where you can actually create new people out of cyberspace. So, maybe I upload myself into virtual reality. I meet a nice girl there. She turns out to be an AI construct, but that's fine. It's all just information processing. We just combine our mind files together and we have a child in cyberspace, and then we download that child into a baby's body, and she downloads herself, and we're a happy family. All of this could come to pass. And in that situation, I think we need to ask ourselves, like, how do we deal with this? I
Do
think
you,
it's
when you say all of this could come to pass, I mean, do you've looked at this, quite extensively? You know, is this really a possibility for you? Because everything that you're describing there, it reminds me like of a horror movie. I'm just thinking, like a zombie movie. A bunch of these bodies, even though they're not just flesh and blood, right? They've got spare parts in them, and they've got a computer chip in my brain, whatever. They're even worse than zombies. I mean, these people are disembodied even from their own body,
yeah.
let
Well,
alone their soul.
there's a real
It's a very
denigration.
dark
There's a real
place.
denigration of the body that's common to all forms of transhumanism. One of the early examples I give in the book is even something as simple or and ubiquitous as the birth control pill, where you have a shift from understanding humans as a union of body and soul, where we have a standard of human flourishing, and the purpose of medicine is to restore you to that standard of human flourishing. What the pill does is, instead it says, your body's operating in a healthy way, your monthly cycle's proceeding normally. We're going to take it and disrupt it. We're going to break it in order to cater to the patient's will or the patient's desires. Same thing with abortion. Your body's healthily gestating an unborn child. We're going to interrupt that process and cut it off. Not for your health, but in accordance with your desires. So it really conceives of the person as not an embodied being, but as a sort of free-floating will that can then impose itself on biology when biology doesn't cooperate with it, in ways that are kind of orthogonal to the flourishing of that body as it would be in a healthy state. Um, so much to say that I think this is already all around us. I gave some extreme examples earlier that sound like very science fiction-y, But to give an example of how it can be difficult to live in the world as an anti-transhuman, as someone who wants to stay human as the rest of the world leaves humanity behind, think about countries that have almost eliminated Down syndrome from their population through eugenic
Yeah.
abortions.
Yeah.
There are, I quote a woman from the UK in this book who said, who chose life, who chose to bring a Down syndrome baby into the world. And she said, we were offered an abortion 15 or 20 times by the doctors. They looked at us like we were insane when we said we didn't want one. We felt pressure to get one. And in a society like that, when you go out with your child who has Down syndrome, you're going to be stigmatized. You know, when almost everyone else, I think in Iceland, maybe 1 or 2 Down syndrome children are born every year. Every year. All the others are
Amazing.
killed.
Yeah, it's true.
And in that kind of society, the support that you could expect as someone making that choice going against society is going to erode over time. You're going to be looked at as a freak. And all you need to do is project that into the future. If artificial wombs become, scalable as a technology and become available to everyone, which I imagine they would be eventually through, insurance covering them and maybe even kind of a government subsidy, a pregnant woman walking around in public visibly pregnant, people are going to look at her with disgust. This will be a world where people will not look at her and smile. They will look at her and recoil because they'll say, this woman's a freak. She's a religious fanatic. She's endangering herself needlessly. She's doing a disservice to her child by gestating it within, her weird, meat sack instead of in the controlled conditions of a laboratory. She probably didn't even get genetic screening done. So if that baby has some kind of genetic disorder, that's totally on her, and that's her fault for being an irresponsible parent. And I think that, as Christians, as people who want to take seriously the idea of natural law and the idea that the human nature we share with Christ is, key to our salvation, we need to start asking ourselves, how much are we willing to suffer? Are we willing to be regarded as the scum of the earth in order to stay human in the world that's coming?
We're going to ask you to join us by helping us get the word out. So if you could make sure you subscribe and then hit like, no matter which platform you're on. Remember that the Become Who You Are podcast is on audio, on any music or podcast app. We're up on Rumble, YouTube. You can find us on X. When you do, subscribe, hit the like button. Couple things to share with people. Love Ed. Love Ed is just such an important apostolate. So it's within our apostolate, the John Paul II Renewal Center. This helps parents give the talk to their children. We're trying to push back on all these gender ideologies and the porn culture, and give children the truth and do it through their parents, and we help them do that. The other one is really taken off too. It's Claymore, Militus Christi, Soldiers for Christ. That's where you see the sword behind me. That's the big sword. That's our logo for Claymore. That's a Claymore sword. And this is for young people, especially young men, Gen Z, high school, all the way through. Let's call it till they're 30 years old or so. They're starting to really understand that something nefarious, sounds very toxic, is going on in the culture. And so they're stepping into the church, and we're discipling them. So we want to help get the word out about those things. And lastly, consider financially supporting us. Everything's in the show notes. Hey, God bless you. Thanks again. When, and I know we're coming up against a pretty hard stop for you. So I just want to tie back in because the real hope, I think, for the young people from what you expressed is remember when Christians were first, the reason the pagans were attracted to Christians was because of the way do you remember, Grayson? Because of love, because the way they loved one another. If we forget about this, all those things you just described, the antithesis of authentic love, of self-giving, and I know that you wrote examples of this in the book. We're not going to be able to get to that, but when we forget, remember these young people again that are listening to right now, Grayson. They're here because they have this heart for the truth, right? Like I don't know what it is, but I'm looking for something more, right? So far the dating apps and all these kind of things, okay, I see where they could come in and maybe help me. Just like you said, nuclear, it could be electricity or it could be a bomb, right? It's how we look at it. But I remember it's love. It comes down to love. John Paul, and of course, he gets this from Jesus Christ himself, just the two great commandments: be filled with divine life and love, and then become a person of love. I think if we don't get back to those roots that you mentioned so well already, from a philosophical standpoint, natural law, nature's laws, and then to look at Christ himself takes on a body to unite us with that divinity again. This is what we're looking for, right? This transhumanism. And how does he do this? He takes on his own body, and then he gives us this in the Eucharist, where we have to, you mentioned in the book, the difference with Catholicism is you have to go to the church. You have to show up because you're going to receive, right, the Eucharist. And maybe your last kind of thoughts here, because the end of the book, you got to read through and make sure you get to the end, because you made some profound thoughts there, and how AI, even an app, a prayer app, if you're not careful, the algos will take you into a good feeling thing again.
Mhm.
And this is more than a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. I think that attempting to hold on to our humanity, in the face of what we're dealing with, in the face of these technologies, and then the cultural forces pushing these technologies on us, that want us to augment ourselves, alter our children, alter our minds, live in virtual reality and separate ourselves from our bodies. These are all lies, and I think they're all dangerous. I genuinely think, and I talk about this a lot in the conclusion of the book, that this is, a work of the enemy, that these technologies are, on par with what uh, these demonic forces were doing before the flood. If you look at, Genesis 6 and the following chapters, and then at the expanded versions of those stories that you're given in the Book of Enoch. You saw the same thing. These demonic super intelligences were interfacing with humans, producing offspring, the Nephilim, and then giving them technologies to have greater power over their fellow humans and over nature, while at the same time transforming their own humanity. And we're seeing a lot of
That's a great part of the book too,
yeah,
by the way.
and God, sees this and concludes that if this continues, my creation will be destroyed, and sends the flood. He's promised there will not be another flood. Will there be some kind of other calamity to save us from ourselves? I don't know. I'm hesitant to pray for anything so calamitous and so drastic, but I think it would be better than the alternative that we might be facing if transhumanism continues to proceed. So, yeah, so much to say. Hold
Yeah,
on to
well,
your humanity, because
yes.
it's through our humanity that we're redeemed, through the humanity we share with Christ that we're redeemed. All the things, all the limitations, pain, suffering, loneliness, death, all these things that the transhumanists hate and that they think they can fix by tweaking our brains, or tweaking your genes so that your body naturally makes more serotonin and you're just happy all the time and you don't have to experience misery, or uploading yourself to the cloud so you don't have to experience death and you can be immortal. All of these things are taking you away from that embodiment. And it's those limitations, the things that transhumanists want to escape through technological means. It's through those actual limitations that we're saved. That's the cross that we're meant to take up. That's the saints and the martyrs. From a transhumanist perspective, like who's a bigger sucker than a martyr who,
Yes.
voluntarily takes on suffering and takes on death. But these are the people who have achieved what the transhumanists are dreaming of. These are the ones who have achieved immortality, and are reigning with Christ. And
Is
it's important to remember.
what a beautiful perspective. I'm going to hold this up, and I'll make sure, of course, I get a picture of this, on the screen also. Where can we get this at? where can we reach out to you if they have any questions, or should they just be reaching out to the publisher?
Sure, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Hemingquay, Hemingquay.
Wait, give us that one a little slower.
Hemingquay, like Hemingway.
I love it.
So my DMs are open if you want to talk to me there. I have a website, graysonquay.com, where you can leave me a comment through the little comment box there. I'll get that in my email. The book's available on Amazon. You can get it as an ebook, an audiobook. If you don't like my voice, good news. I don't read the audiobook. I have a narrator who does that, and he's great. And then you can also get it straight from the publisher, which is always best because Amazon doesn't take a cut then. The publisher website is sophiainstitute.com/transhuman. That'll take you straight to my book.
Anything else that we need to know?
No, I don't think so. That's about it.
I'm going to get those links, everybody, in the show notes. Grayson, thanks for joining us. And the book is really worth reading. And what you do in there is you're not afraid to describe it for what it is, but you're also bringing that other perspective and helping really all of us get a good handle on what we're seeing and the questions we have. And then, like you said, to stay fully human. So God bless you. Thanks for your work.
Bless you as well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.